Chinese President Xi Jinping in his New Year's message. Higiev Hamadudu, who is the leader of the Party of National Unity and Progress, believes that under the leadership of the Communist Party, China has successfully reached many world-renowned achievements, proving that the socialist development model chosen by China is effective and that all countries can learn from that experience.
China has been a miracle demonstration of what progress can be. China has shown so much socio-economic progress in our lifetime. It's not something you look at in historic terms. In our own lifetime, China has lifted millions of its people, out of poverty. And therefore, I agree with President Xi Jinping that China's chosen model of development socialism is working. And we respect it, we admire it, and we can learn a lot from it because it has proven its efficacy. There is no country in the recent history that has made so much progress using the socialist model like China. So China must remain respected.
Other world leaders addressed their citizens ahead of the new year. They reviewed 2021 with gratitude and called for unity to combat the challenges ahead.
Russian President Vladimir Putin addressed the nation in a televised New Year's speech. He said Russia faces challenges, but the people have learned to deal with them.
We are all united by the hope for positive changes in the future, but we understand that they can't be separated from the events during the outgoing year. We have firmly and consistently defended our national interests, the security of the country and its citizens. We have promptly restored the economy, and we are approaching implementation of strategic development goals. Of course, there are plenty of unsolved issues, but we have overcome this year in a dignified way.
Putin also wished the people good health and expressed condolences to those who have lost loved ones during the pandemic. He said the main goal now is to improve living standards and incomes to make the country stronger. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson said the United Kingdom was doing incomparably better than last year in his New Year's message. He attributed the recovery to a successful vaccination campaign, but still urged people to get a booster shot.
And there's one overriding reason why the UK has been able to maintain the most open economy and society of any major European economy, and that is because the British people have responded heroically, voluntarily, and in almost incredible numbers to the call to get vaccinated, get that jab, and do something that will make 2022 a happy new year for us all.
French President Emmanuel Macron recorded his New Year's speech from the garden of the Élysée Presidential Palace. He said the country has witnessed significant improvement in 2021.
France, despite the hardships, is stronger today than it was 2 years ago. All this is thanks to you, thanks to all of us, thanks to our spirit of resistance, our solidarity, our civic mindedness, our commitment, and our entrepreneurial spirit. The ambition and solidarity we have always shown allow us to hope for the best. 2022 will perhaps be the year we leave the pandemic behind. I want to believe it with you that this is the year we'll see the end of this endless day.
Macron highlighted the role of the European Union in fighting against COVID-19. He said the coming year would hopefully be a turning point for the EU as France takes over the bloc's presidency in 2022. In his first televised New Year's message, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz expressed thanks for the amicable transition of the federal government and hailed the unity of the German people. He also voiced determination to effectively contain COVID-19 in 2022.
Denn das Virus überträgt sich.
We will do everything, really everything, we can together to finally defeat coronavirus in the new year. My dear fellow citizens, getting a grip on coronavirus is one of the major tasks in the new year.
Meanwhile, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres focused on recovery and unity in his New Year's message on Tuesday.
The world welcomes 2022 with our hopes for the future being tested. These are moral and real-life tests. And they are tests that humanity can pass if we commit to making 2022 a year of recovery for everyone, and to move forward together with hope in what our human family can accomplish. Together, let's make recovery our resolution for 2022, for people, planet, and prosperity. I wish you all a happy and peaceful new year.
The WHO's Director General says he's optimistic the pandemic will be defeated in 2022. In a New Year's statement, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus also set a goal of vaccinating 70% of the world's population by July. He warned against narrow nationalism and vaccine hoarding. Tedros has previously criticized rich nations for gobbling up the global vaccine supply, while people from less developed countries wait for their first doses. The comments come at a time when the global caseload stands at 287 million and the death toll nearly 5.5 million. While many countries are welcoming the new year, India has witnessed a tragedy as 12 people died at a stampede in India's controlled Kashmir on Saturday morning. Officials say the stampede was triggered by a heavy rush of devotees who went to pay their respects to mark the beginning of the new year. Prime Minister Narendra Modi expressed grief over the deaths. Injured devotees have been transferred to local hospital for treatment. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, takes effect this January the 1st. It is the world's largest free trade agreement among Asia-Pacific nations, covering 30% of the world's population and accounting for roughly 30% of global economic output. Signed in November 2020, RCEP groups the 10 members of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, as well as China, Japan, South Korea, Australia, and New Zealand. The Asia-Pacific region says RCEP is a shining example of multilateralism in action. It reinforces regional economic integration by expanding common accumulative rules and provides greater transparency, fairness, and predictability for businesses. The taikonauts aboard the China space station are celebrating the new year in orbit. Zhai Zhigang and Wang Yaping and Ye Guangfu are the first taikonauts to do so. And today, a special event for them. They have had a live video call with young students in Beijing, Hong Kong, and Macau. They were sent into the core module of the Tiangong space station last October for a 6-month stay. That's China's longest mission so far. The crew has also conducted 2 spacewalks. Last year, China launched 55 rockets, leading the world for the 3rd year running. Well, 2021 has been a tough year under the pandemic. We spoke to Kenyans about that year and their expectations for 2022. Let's listen in.
Obviously, after very many months, it starts getting, the anxiety levels start rising. The kids get bored staying at home throughout. So suppose ending the partial lockdown and people just getting back to their lives has been a very positive change.
Tough because of the pandemic. It's been a tough year because things slowed down economically, and also even at our workplace, so many things had to hold. I work in a university, so even the academic year had to be so much delayed. We believe the Kenyan government, or us as a people, we've taken the measures that are needed, and we are seeing the COVID is slowing down, though there's the new variant. But we believe our government will do the best to make sure that we move on with life as it should be. So we are very hopeful for the next year.
We got COVID in September, but we recovered. She also had it, thanks to supplements and all that, and the good weather that we have in Nairobi. So we are grateful that we're still here to talk about it. We're hoping for 2022. There's hope. We can only hope that things will get better. Because I think when you panic, things get worse. But when you have hope, you get better.
Well, that's it for this edition of The World Today. I'll be back shortly with more news from the continent in Africa Live. Thanks for watching.
So this is it. I'm just about to be shot.
Tents here, bottles are being thrown as they do so.
There are about 3 critical bridges here in Malawi. That's one of them. We're going to cross that bridge.
As you can see behind me, police forces
who are replying with gas. Gas just came in.
Tear gas, so it's all begun now.
Divisions leading the charge into West Mosul have brought us here.
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots.
This is where most of the fighting has been concentrated.
This is the front line now after 9 days of fighting.
We're about 2 to 3 kilometers from
within
the front
clear
line.
view of this front line position.
This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Africans across the continent welcome the new year with cautious optimism. Concerns about teachers' availability as Uganda reopens schools after a 2-year closure due to a COVID-19 outbreak. And we look at the impact of protests in Sudan against military rule. Hello and welcome to Africa Live. As always, great to have you with us. I'm Richard Nta live in Nairobi, and for those of you joining us from across the continent and around the globe, we thank you for joining us. Let's take a look at other stories making headlines this hour. In business, Zimbabwe bounces back to food self-sufficiency after 2 successive droughts. And in sports, Ethiopia's Aragawi and Teye end 2021, breaking respective 5-kilometer records. Once again, welcome to Africa Live. Great to have you along with us for this hour. Let's begin in South Africa, where the country ushered in the new year with plenty of cheer after the government lifted its midnight curfew. The decision to lift the curfew comes after nearly 2 years of COVID-19 restrictions. CGTN's Joy Karuki Juma reports.
It is an atmosphere of celebration in South Africa. Citizens and business owners relieved that the 2-year-long curfew has been lifted.
I love that we understand the virus a little bit better. Also love that we had lockdown. It was needed. We complied, but here we are. And as you can see, it's our most quiet New Year's in Melville ever. And we're quite surprised by it. But maybe we've learned a little bit from the lockdown. For us, especially in tourism, we are very grateful.
We're all about having a good time. So now that we have been allowed to actually have a good time, these doors are just going to be here for display. We're not going to shut these down no more. We are all in, yeah.
Gatherings have been raised to no more than 1,000 people indoors and no more than 2,000 outdoors. The government says it made the changes to lockdown restrictions based on the trajectory of the pandemic. The government has also cited levels of vaccination and available capacity in the health sector to lift the curfew.
The most important thing is very good for all South Africans who have been in a curfew for quite some time. And for me as a tourist, I'm excited that you don't have to go back to the hotel. You can roam around on the beautiful beach over here. And let's see if it brings a party.
On Thursday, South Africa became the first country to say it believed it had passed the peak of the Omicron coronavirus variant wave of infections.
I hope people don't get too excited and that we go boss and then we have super spreader events, So I'm hoping that people approach with caution and that it's a good thing. I think it's been a long time coming. I think people are tired of the restrictions, so I'm happy to see our freedom sort of returning, and let's just hope it doesn't come at a price.
South Africa has recorded the highest caseload and death toll in Africa during the pandemic. Government data shows a 29.7% drop in the number of new cases detected in the week ending December 25th compared to a week earlier.
It's almost 2 years now without, having to contain ourselves within the curfew, the curfew and all of that. So, but I'm definitely here for the nightlife in Cape Town. You understand? So I want to have a good time. I want to have an amazing time without that feeling of being, I have to go back home.
The government is urging people to keep getting vaccinated and observing health protocols. Joy Kirukijuma, CGTN.
Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta has called on the citizens to reimagine a future that reflects on the past and builds a better way forward. He said this while conveying his message of hope for the new year. Let's listen in.
The new year is a time to reflect with immense gratitude to God on the accomplishments and breakthroughs of the last 12 months. It is also a time for us all to reflect on what worked and what did not, and what we can reimagine in the new year. As we bid goodbye to 2021, we rejoice in the fact that 2022 gives us all an opportunity to do things better by offering us a reset. The new year is one for course correction and building back better. Leadership is about vision, while politics is about positions. Leadership is about the next generation, whereas politics is concerned merely with the next election. Indeed, fellow Kenyans, our obsession with politics has only slowed down the realization of our potential as a people. I say so because the colonizers introduced a virus in our African political systems. They made us believe that the political kingdom was more desirable than the economic one. And this pursuit of the political kingdom has only enhanced poverty in Africa. We must, brothers and sisters, rethink this model.
3, 2, 1.
Due to an increase in coronavirus cases in Uganda, authorities banned public celebrations and the traditional fireworks that have characterized the New Year's festivities across the nation. However, some Ugandans have welcomed in the new year with optimism.
I feel there was a time we were scared, that we were worried about the future with COVID-19, and then it became one of us, maybe 4 or 5 months into it, and we've stayed way too long acting like we are scared of it in terms of the measures and all of that, yet in reality we are ready to live with it, and it doesn't look like it's about to go away. It's now about the measures, the SOPs and all of that, and ensuring that you know how to treat it if you catch it. and try not to catch it as much as possible, live with it generally, and I think we are ready for that.
Ugandans have suffered a lot in the past 2 years, and I know they are good listeners. We are going to observe the SPOs. People are going to go and get SPOs, sorry. People are going to go and get immunized. I'm quite optimistic that we will stay open. Man, another lockdown, people will run mad. Me inclusive, will run mad.
Schools in Uganda are set to reopen in January after 2 years of closure following the COVID-19 lockdown restrictions. But as learning institutions prepare to receive students, there's worry that some teachers, especially those attached to private schools, may not return to the classroom. It is believed many have quit the profession to join more lucrative business ventures, as Michael Baleke reports.
Shafik Mbabazi was a teacher of chemistry and mathematics at secondary school. But when schools were shut down during the pandemic, he was forced to look elsewhere to earn a living. Shafik has since ventured into the motorbike taxi business, set up a food store, and also runs a men's hair salon.
Of course, I'm not getting much, but at least I'm able to sustain myself, sustain my family, sustain my parents, and all the people who I take care of, with the little I'm receiving, and with the ease.
Shafik has now decided to quit the classroom and concentrate on his businesses. He says the 2-year school closure has killed his morale.
Some of us who came up from humble backgrounds, we wanted a course that was perfect. We wanted a course that we feel is going to feed us for the rest of our lives, until when God calls us. But then at the moment, time reached when we cannot use what we studied to do anything. So it pushed us to the walls. So when you say, do I feel betrayed? I can say yes.
When the schools closed in early 2020, the government continued to pay the wages of state school teachers. But for private schools that solely relied on parents for fees, incomes dried up, and most schools had to reduce or stop paying teachers' salaries. School administrators are now worried that as schools reopen, a shortage of teachers is likely.
There's not been any training for teachers since lockdown. So they feel that we are in the field, either have to be convinced to come back and resume the duty, or schools will have to think otherwise.
However, teachers or no teachers, most schools have started preparing ground for the new term. The government has tagged the school reopening program to the vaccination of teachers, but the Ministry of Education says out of 550,000 teachers, less than 9,000 have received the jab. The COVID-19 crisis has claimed the lives of more than 3,000 Ugandans, some of them parents. And while measures have succeeded in containing the outbreak so far, they have also caused significant damage to the economy, devastating livelihoods. This means many more children will not be able to return to school.
There are schools that had loans in banks. I know of some schools that have been sold off. I heard of a school that already announced not opening, and already parents have been sent circulars telling them to look for schools elsewhere. So those are some of the challenges that schools are likely to face.
The government is on course to open schools in the second week of January. But for the teachers like Shafik, the COVID-19 pandemic means that when schools reopen, they won't be there. Michael Baleke, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
You're watching Africa Live. We will see you on the other side of the break with more news stories. Here's what's ahead. We look at the impact of protests in Sudan against military rule. Welcome back to Africa Live. Thanks for staying with us. The state funeral of the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu is currently underway in Cape Town, South Africa. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa is among those who are in attendance. The funeral mass is being held at St. George's Cathedral in Cape Town. Archbishop Tutu, a Nobel Peace Prize winner, was widely revered across racial and cultural divides in South Africa. He was hailed for his moral rectitude and principled fight against white minority rule. Tutu was pronounced dead a day after Christmas. Before his death, he requested for the cheapest coffin and frowned on any lavish funeral expenses. His body will be cremated and his remains interred behind the cathedral pulpit he often used to preach against racial injustice. And in Sudan, at least 5 people have been killed during a crackdown by security forces on protests, and that's according to the Central Committee of Sudanese Doctors. Thousands of Sudanese demonstrators have been expressing their opposition to military rule. On Thursday, they tried to reach the presidential palace in the heart of Khartoum, but they faced security barriers and soldiers fired tear gas on them.
Demonstrators in Sudan have demanded that the military play no role in government during a transition to free elections. In a show of defiance, hundreds took to the streets of the capital Khartoum and other major cities. Security forces confronted the protesters and blocked bridges linking the 3 cities of Khartoum, Khartoum Bari and Omdurman. Authorities in the country have cut off internet services to quell the protests. Protesters are demanding civil rule. They want soldiers to return to the barracks.
I believe that these people in the streets will not accept any initiative that is not from the Resistance Committee, because every person trusts the Resistance Committee as they have no interest other than the interest of the country.
The end of the year demonstrations come after Sudan's Sovereign Council reinstated powers of arrests, detentions and seizures to the intelligence service. The forces of freedom and change say a clear political vision is needed to move the country forward.
We arrived in a procession to the palace. We must have demands. Do we want a complete overthrow of the military establishment and its exit from the state and government? Or do we want to drop al-Burhan? If we do not agree on these matters, the processions will reach the palace with millions of demonstrations.
Demonstrators hope the new year will bring a political and economic breakthrough that will achieve the aspirations of the Sudanese citizens. Noktula Shabalala, CGTN.
6 soldiers have been killed by insurgents in Borno State, the epicenter of the insurgency in Nigeria. They are from Nigeria and Niger and were among troops of the multinational joint task force keeping the peace in the Lake Chad Basin. But the troops have also dealt a blow to the insurgents, killing 22 of them. Correspondent Tessa McKenday reports.
Spokesman for the Multinational Joint Task Force, Colonel Mohammed Dole, says the casualties were recorded during an operation by the troops to clear insurgents in the Malam Fatori area of Borno State. He says the troops were registered by the insurgents who engaged them in a fierce gun battle. 16 other soldiers were wounded as a result, but the troops forced the insurgents to abandon their enclaves. Military authorities say beyond the troops killing 22 of the insurgents, 5 gun trucks, motorcycles and other ammunition were recovered from them. Boko Haram is a terror group operating mostly in Nigeria's northeast region and some countries around Lake Chad such as Cameroon, Chad and Niger Republic. The United Nations says attacks by the insurgents have killed more than 35,000 people and left 8.7 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. Tassim Akendi, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
European countries are beginning to return artifacts looted from Africa during the colonial era. Countries like Nigeria and Benin have seen a number of stolen treasures returned, with more expected. As artifacts return to their original owners, CGTN's Deji Badamosi explores the significance of this development.
For many Africans, the return of these artifacts is literally the return of their stolen cultural heritage. Many have been agitating for the return of the artifacts for decades, and now they are beginning to see their efforts yield positive results. Now, these artifacts hold very deep cultural significance for a lot of African societies. As a matter of fact, for some societies, these artifacts are actually deities and have very deep religious meanings.
This is what our great-great-grandfathers, great-grandmothers used in the shrine in those days, not for killing. They go to the shrine to pray.
Now, the return is also expected to mark the beginning of the closure of a dark chapter in the relations between most of these African countries and their Western counterparts who colonized them. But then, the issue has thrown up a very passionate debate in the art community here and across the society over whether or not some of these African countries have the capacity to store and maintain the artifacts that have been returned.
We don't have the technology for carbon dating. We don't have the technology for thermoluminescence analysis. We don't have the storage space. Go down to some of our museums in Africa. I'm not going to be specific about any particular country.
Some of these artifacts are more than 300, 400 years old, even before they were stolen. How are they preserved? We had the local technology to preserve. The government is working in partnership with many organizations to provide museum infrastructure.
Well, that debate is still ongoing, but it is certainly not stopping the return of the artifacts, at least for now. DG Badimasi, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
After 2 successive droughts, Zimbabwe bounced back to food self-sufficiency in 2021. A good rainy season increased output of major crops, which had a positive effect on their entire economy. From Harare, CGTN's Farai Mwakatuya reports on Zimbabwe's agricultural boom that sparked the country's economic recovery.
Production of grains was spurred by a conservation farming technique that's aimed at mitigating climate change. More than 2.2 million households were supplied with inputs to roll it out.
They were required to adopt all the tenets and the principles of conservation agriculture, including minimum soil disturbance, mulching, the religious adoption of crop rotations. So it was quite a flagship program, and it contributed significantly. In fact, it contributed over 40% to the national grain or maize output.
By the end of November, more than 1.2 million tons of grain had been delivered, compared to just 327,000 tons at the same time last year. Other crops also grew, including tobacco, where deliveries rose 13%, and cotton, which achieved its highest yield in 5 years. Overall, agriculture grew by 34% this year, and that's had a ripple effect on the entire economy, which will expand by more than 6%.
Both the food and the cash crops, I think there was a huge increase in output, which obviously also had a positive effect on the industrial sector. We CZI has already said that they're expecting capacity utilization to end the year at about 61%, and it's largely on account of the huge inputs coming from agriculture.
To sustain the performance, government launched an agricultural recovery plan to address 4 critical P's.
P number 1 is production. We definitely have to upscale our production. P number 2 is productivity. We need to upscale our productivity. In fact, that's our smartest way out of the woods in terms of food insecurity. Then the other P is obviously profitability, especially at farmhold level. That's the other P. And then, of course, the last P is partnerships and collaborations.
The latter encourages private funding for farmers.
It is a good thing that this past season has already shown us that there is room and capacity to grow. All we need to do is to reconfigure the financing of agriculture so that we bring in more sustainable means to produce and crowd in private sector so that the private sector is more involved in the actual production.
Contract farming arrangements that have been hugely successful in tobacco are being extended to other crops. Farai Mwakatuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Restaurants, parks, gardens, and other outdoor businesses in Nigeria are reporting good sales this festive season, months after reopening following closures due to COVID-19. Restrictions on public gatherings by the government to curb the spread of the coronavirus took a toll on them last year, leading to job losses. With that report, here's Tessa McKinney.
Atiku Sankey manages a fast food business in Jos. He says they made a lot of sales and profit this festive season, unlike last year when there was a lockdown due to COVID-19.
The response from the post-lockdown pandemic era has been good for us particularly. People seem to be eager to come out and do the things they were used to doing. So business has been good.
Atiku's business is just one of many trying to cash in on the festive season while remaining cautious of the coronavirus. The World Bank attributes 42% of overall job losses in Nigeria between 2020 and 2021 to the outbreak of the pandemic.
Well, the lockdown did actually bad, very, very bad, because most businesses, small-scale businesses have actually been crumbled, and there were limited need of manpower in most organizations, so it actually did bad.
Economic analysts say businesses in the country would blossom better through credits and loans from the government.
The government should actually develop a model in which they will help the citizens. They can actually give out soft loans to business-minded people, to those that are already in business, so that it can enable them to boost their businesses, and they will do well. And the issue of unemployment will be bygone.
The Nigerian government says it is committed to supporting businesses in the country. The government says it has earmarked nearly $200 million to support businesses impacted especially by the coronavirus pandemic. About 1 million people are expected to benefit from the credit support. Atiku hopes he will be able to obtain a grant from the government and that there won't be lockdowns in future. And he says he is hungry to expand his business. Tessim Akendi, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
And we are not done just yet. We've got your sports news coming up after the break. Here's what's ahead. Ethiopia's Aragawi and Nta and 2021 breaking respective 5-kilometer records.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Kenyatta, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival, and hope.